In this video, we're going to explore addition meaning and properties. So we will explore addition properties that are always true. By the end of the video, there's 3 properties, the associative, commutative, and identity property that you should be able to identify and use when you are adding. Before we get into the properties, let's do a little bit of a review of some vocabulary. When we are adding, the numbers that we add are called the addends. So in this number sentence or equation, we have 100 and 200. Those are the addends, the number that we are adding together. When I add those, the sum is the answer. Or son of a gun, I can't do this tonight. I can't do this. I can't talk.
It's okay if you mess up.
No, it's not.
It's more natural.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to be like talking and then not sound like an idiot. Take 54. All right, here we go. This is it. I'm going to nail this one. In this video, we're going to explore addition meaning and properties. So we will explore addition properties that are always true. By the end of the video, we'll have 3 properties that you should be able to identify, recognize, and use within your everyday math. Those are the associative, commutative, and identity properties. We'll explore those in a moment, but first let's review some vocabulary. When I'm looking at an addition equation, the 2 numbers that I'm adding are called the addends. So 100 and 200 in this equation are called the addends. When I add those 2 numbers together, the answer in that is called a sum. So anytime I'm adding, the answer is really the sum. So let's move on to some of our properties. Let's say that I grab a handful of 2-color counters and I drop them on my desk to see how they land. In this case, I had some yellow and some red. So looking, I have 8 yellow and 4 red. If I want to know how many I have all together, naturally I would add. So my number sentence would be 8 plus 4. Those are my 2 addends. When I put those 2 together, my sum is 12. Let's say instead I wanted to flip those around and I wanted to do the red first and then the yellow and add 4 plus 8. Is that going to be the same thing? Yes, I should still get 12. So no matter what order I add the numbers in, as long as the numbers don't change, my sum will be the same. This is called the commutative property, or the order property of addition. And that means that numbers can be added in any order and the sum will always be the same. Here's another example of the commutative property. Let's take 5 plus 3. I have 5 cubes and 3 cubes. If I put them together, I have 8. Now if I switch those around, and I start with 3 and put 5 more out, when I put them together, I still have 8. The addends or numbers didn't change, and so neither did the sum. We're going to look at another property next called the identity property or the 0 property of addition. And what that says is the sum of 0 and any number is the same number. So if I'm adding 0 to any addend, it's always going to be the other addend. So for example, if I have 7 plus 0, I have 7 cubes out and I add no more, 0 more, I'm going to have 7. Let's look at another example. If I have 0 plus 12, so I put out 12 cubes and I put out 0 more, I'm going to have 12. This is a pretty straightforward identity and it makes sense. We just need to know the name of it. Let's look at our one last property for today. Let's say that I have 3 cups and they have different numbers of counters. I have a green cup with 6 counters, an orange cup with 4 counters, and a red cup with 2 counters. If I want to add all of them together, let's say that I start with 6 plus 4. If I put those cups together and I count how many I have all together, I have 10, and then I need to add my 2 more, which would mean I would have 12. Let's say instead I start and I have those same cups, but when I'm adding them, I start with 4 and 2. So I know that together that's 6. Then if I add 6 more, it's 12. So no matter what order I put them in or I count them in, I still have the same number because those add-ins didn't change. This is called the associative or grouping property of addition. Add-ins can be grouped in any order and the sum will be the same. So as long as I'm adding and the numbers don't change, if I change what order I add them in, the sum won't change. So let's take an example of 5 plus 3 plus 8. If I am starting and I add 5 plus 3 first, as indicated by the blue and green cubes, 5 plus 3 is 8. Then I add on 8 more. My sum is 16. Now if I switch that around and instead I add 3 plus 8 first, so I'd have 11 and then add 5 more on afterwards, I still get 16. Since my add-ins didn't change, if I choose to group 2 of them first and then add on the other, no matter what order I do that in, my sum is always going to be the same. So either side, either way I put it, it's always going to be 16. Let's take a look at a few examples and see if you can identify what the property is and what that missing number would be. So in this example, I have blank plus 9 equals 9. So think about what number could complete that equation and what's the name of the identity that helps us know this, or the property that knows this. So this would be an example of the identity property. I know that 0 plus 9 equals 9. If I'm adding a number and the sum stayed the same, that means I must be adding 0. Let's take a look at another example. In this case, I have 4 plus 6 equals 6 plus blank. So knowing that on either side of the equal sign, it needs to be the same as and balance, what property would that be? I would know in order for that to balance, it should be the number 4, meaning I can take 4 plus 6 or 6 plus 4 and it'd be the same sum. And that's the commutative property. Let's look at one more practice example. In this equation, again, I want both sides of the equation to balance. So I have 2 plus blank plus 6. And notice that the 2 and that missing number is in the parentheses, which means I'm adding that first. And then is equal to 2 plus 3 and 6 added. So this would mean I'm adding these 2 first. And this side would mean I'm adding these 2 first. So I can tell that the missing number is 3, and that's the associative property, because no matter what order I add them in, it's going to be the same. So as you are working today, you have a practice page, and what you're going to do is look at the equations, and you're going to try to find that missing number where that square is, and write it below. Based on the different properties that we learned about today, you should be able to figure out what those numbers are. There are a few story problems that go with this and ask you to explain your thinking. So do your best to think through those properties and answer the questions that it asks you to. If you have trouble, refer to our anchor chart and also go back and rewatch the video to help you.